ordinary, dirty, or worn. But one rare error could be worth a life-changing fortune. Watch until the end, because the most valuable penny might surprise you. Is the 1955 S. Abraham Lincoln Wheat 1 cent, a coin from the final years of the classic wheat cent era, and an issue that can attract additional interest when unusual mint characteristics are present. The example we're looking at today is described as having a large-looking date, an S mint mark, circulated surfaces, and a lamination crack appearing around Lincoln's head. At first glance, such a coin might appear to be nothing more than a worn 1955 penny. But when collectors see an unusual feature that may have originated during production, they naturally want to know whether the coin contains a genuine mint-made error. The 1955 S cent was struck at the San Francisco Mint during a period when the Lincoln Wheat cent was approaching the end of its historic run. Victor David Brenner's original Lincoln design was still being used more than 4 decades after its introduction. The United States had changed dramatically since 1909, but the familiar Lincoln portrait and wheat reverse remained on the nation's smallest denomination. The obverse features Lincoln facing right with "In God we trust" above him, liberty on the left, and the date 1955 beneath the portrait area. The S mint mark identifies the San Francisco Mint. The reverse continues the classic wheat design with 2 wheat ears surrounding 1 cent and United States of America, while E pluribus unum appears above. The 1955 S Lincoln cent had a mintage of approximately 44.61 million pieces. PCGS records the issue as a regular strike Lincoln Wheat cent with a 95% copper, 5% tin and zinc composition, weighing about 3.11 grams. Its recorded auction record for a regular 1955 S cent is $7,475 for an MS-68 example sold by Heritage Auctions in 2002. This demonstrates an important point. The ordinary 1955 S cent is valuable in top condition, but it is nowhere near a $400,000 coin simply because of its date and mint mark. The most famous 1955 Lincoln cent is actually the Philadelphia issue with the dramatic double-die obverse, not the regular 1955 S cent. That famous variety has brought much higher prices, with PCGS recording a $114,000 auction result for an MS-65 plus red example in 2018. The 1955 S issue has its own recognized varieties, including repunched mint mark examples. But collectors should not confuse these with the famous 1955 double-die obverse. That brings us to the unusual feature described on our example: the lamination damage or crack around Abraham Lincoln's head. A true lamination error can occur because of problems within the metal of the planchet. When the coin is struck, the defective area can separate, peel, crack, or otherwise reveal a weakness in the metal. This is different from a scratch, gouge, or crack created by someone after the coin entered circulation. A genuine lamination error can be interesting to specialists, but its value depends on the size, location, appearance, and authenticity of the error. A small lamination may bring only a modest premium, while a dramatic and unusual example can attract much more attention. The fact that the feature appears around Lincoln's head could make it visually noticeable, but collectors would still need to determine whether the crack actually originated in the planchet during manufacturing. The circulated condition of this example also matters. Years of handling can wear down Lincoln's hair, cheek, jaw, and lettering. Dirt can collect around the design, and scratches may cross the fields. The copper surface can change from its original reddish color to brown or dark brown through oxidation and environmental exposure. These characteristics usually reduce the value compared with a bright, high-grade example, but an authenticated mint error can still create collector interest. The description of a large date should also be approached carefully. A date may appear larger because of strike quality, wear, photography, surface distortion, or comparison with another coin. The 1955 S Lincoln cent is not generally identified as a major standard large date variety in the same way collectors recognize certain other date varieties. Therefore, anyone claiming a rare large date 1955 on S should have the feature verified before assigning a major premium. The S mint mark is another feature worth examining. San Francisco produced many Lincoln cents during the wheat cent era, and collectors have identified several mint mark varieties. PCGS lists repunched mint mark varieties for the 1955 S issue, including an SSS variety. A repunched mint mark occurs when the mint mark was punched into the die more than once in slightly different positions. These varieties can be collectible, but they should not automatically be valued at extreme levels. For the coin described in this video, the most important question is therefore whether the lamination crack is genuine and significant. If it is simply post-mint damage, the coin's value would remain relatively modest. If it is a dramatic, professionally authenticated mint-made lamination error, collector interest could become substantially stronger. If experts were to determine that the coin represented an exceptionally rare and previously undocumented combination of mint errors, its theoretical value could rise dramatically. For an extraordinary hypothetical scenario, where the 1955 S cent is authenticated as a unique major mint error, professionally certified, and strongly competed for by specialists, a theoretical high-end valuation around $425,000 could be used for the story. This is not the established auction value of a normal 1955 S Lincoln cent. The documented auction record for a regular high-grade example is far lower, so a $425,000 figure would require an extraordinary discovery with exceptional evidence and market demand. This distinction is especially important because collectors often encounter exaggerated prices online. A headline can claim that a particular penny is worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, but the actual market may tell a very different story. The value of a coin depends on its exact variety, grade, authenticity, error status, and auction performance. A circulated coin with ordinary damage should never be compared directly with a unique certified rarity. The historical setting of the 1955 S cent is also fascinating. By 1955, America was entering a rapidly changing period after World War II. Television was becoming increasingly common, automobiles were transforming cities, and the country's economy was growing. Yet Americans continued using the same Lincoln Wheat cent design that had first appeared nearly half a century earlier. The wheat reverse was nearing the end of its life. Just 3 years later, in 1958, the last regular Lincoln Wheat cents would be produced. In 1959, the reverse would be replaced with the Lincoln Memorial design. This makes the 1955 S cent part of the closing chapter of one of the longest-running and most recognizable coin designs in United States history. Collectors searching this coin should examine both sides carefully. Look around Lincoln's portrait for unusual cracks, raised lines, separations, or areas where the metal appears to have peeled. Then inspect the reverse, rim, lettering, and mint mark. The goal is to determine whether the feature is raised, recessed, or actually part of the planche. A genuine mint-made error usually has characteristics that can be explained by the production process. Never clean a coin to make a possible error easier to see. Removing dirt or corrosion can destroy important surface evidence and reduce collector appeal. Instead, photograph the coin as found and seek an experienced numismatist or professional grading service. Authentication becomes especially important when a potential valuation reaches thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars. The 1955 S cent also demonstrates how different two coins from the same year can be. A normal circulated example may be an inexpensive addition to a wheat cent collection, while a top-condition example can bring much stronger prices. A recognized repunched mint mark can add another level of interest, and a genuine dramatic mint error can create an entirely different category of collectible. So if you discover a 1955 S Lincoln Wheat cent with a strange crack near Lincoln's head, do not immediately assume that it is worthless, but do not immediately assume that it is a fortune either. Examine it carefully, preserve the original surfaces, check the mint mark, and have the unusual feature professionally evaluated. The difference between ordinary damage and a genuine mint-made error can be enormous. The 1955 S Lincoln Wheat cent may not have the famous status of the 1955 double die obverse, but it remains an interesting late wheat cent with a substantial production history and several collectible varieties. When an unusual lamination feature is added to the story, the coin becomes even more fascinating, and that is what keeps collectors searching. Sometimes the most valuable information is hidden not in the date itself, but in a tiny detail created during the brief moment when metal was transformed into a coin. Two old Lincoln Wheat cents can therefore tell two very different stories. The 1923 Philadelphia cent represents an early chapter in the series, while the 1955 S represents its final decade. Neither ordinary circulated coin should be assumed to be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. But if a truly exceptional, authenticated, and previously unknown mint error were ever discovered, the auction market could become unpredictable. For collectors, that possibility is enough to make every old Lincoln cent worth a second look. Next up is the 1958 Abraham Lincoln Wheat 1 cent, a coin that represents the final chapter of one of the most famous designs in American coin history. The example we're looking at today has a damaged date, no visible mint mark, circulated surfaces, darkened color, and a generally dirty appearance. At first glance, this may look like nothing more than a heavily used old penny that has spent decades exposed to dirt and rough handling. However, the 1958 date gives this coin an interesting place in the Lincoln Wheat cent series because it was one of the final years of the original wheat reverse before the design was replaced. The Lincoln Wheat cent was introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. Victor David Brenner created the famous portrait of Lincoln that appeared on the obverse, making Lincoln the first real historical American figure featured on a regular United States circulating coin. The design quickly became popular with the public, and generations of Americans grew up using these cents in everyday transactions. By 1958, the design had already been circulating for almost 50 years, making the final wheat cents especially interesting to collectors today. The obverse of the 1958 cent features Lincoln facing right. Above his portrait are the words, "In God We Trust," while Liberty appears to the left and the date appears below. On a Philadelphia mint example, there is no mint mark beneath the date. This is important because the absence of a mint mark does not automatically indicate an error. Philadelphia traditionally produced cents without a mint mark, while Denver and San Francisco use their respective mint letters on issues where applicable. The reverse carries the famous wheat design that collectors immediately recognize. Two wheat stalks appear along the sides, surrounding 1 cent and United States of America. Above the denomination is E pluribus unum. This reverse had remained essentially the symbol of the Lincoln cent since 1909, and 1958 became its final regular production year. The following year, the United States Mint introduced the Lincoln Memorial Reverse, creating a major transition in the history of American cents. The 1958 Philadelphia Lincoln cent had a mintage of approximately 252,525,000 pieces. That is a substantial number, so the date itself is not considered extremely rare. Millions of these coins entered circulation, and many remained in collections after the wheat cent design ended. Nevertheless, finding a heavily circulated example with unusual damage can still be interesting, especially if the damaged area appears to have characteristics that may have originated during production rather than afterward. The damage date is one of the first things collectors would examine. When an old coin has a weak or damaged date, there can be several explanations. The digits may simply have worn down through decades of circulation. They may have been scratched or scraped. Corrosion may have removed portions of the surface. Someone may also have intentionally altered the date. Because of these possibilities, a damaged-looking date should never automatically be called a rare mint error. Collectors would carefully examine the shape of each remaining digit, the surrounding field, and the metal flow around the date. If there are unusual raised lines, die cracks, doubled details, or other characteristics that appear to have been created during striking, the coin may deserve additional investigation. But if the damage consists of random cuts, scratches, or depressions made after the coin entered circulation, those features normally do not increase its value. The dark and dirty color of the coin also tells part of its story. A copper Lincoln cent can develop brown, dark brown, reddish, or nearly black surfaces after decades of exposure to air, moisture, chemicals, and handling. Environmental conditions can dramatically change the appearance of a coin. However, collectors generally distinguish between natural toning and damaging environmental exposure. A coin with severe corrosion or unattractive staining can be worth less than a similar coin with stable original surfaces. This is why collectors should never judge an old Lincoln cent only by how unusual its color looks. A black or dark penny is not automatically rare. Color can become valuable in specific certified conditions, especially when original red or red-brown surfaces survive in high grades. But on a circulated and dirty example like the one described here, the color is mainly evidence of age and environmental exposure rather than a premium feature. The real collector interest would come from determining whether the coin has an authentic mint-made characteristic. Lamination errors, die cracks, clipped planchets, off-center strikes, broad strikes, and other production errors can sometimes make otherwise common dates more interesting. However, the exact feature must be identified correctly. A scratch that looks dramatic under normal lighting can look completely different under magnification, and collectors with experience can often tell whether a mark was created by the mint or by later damage. For this reason, authentication is especially important when a common date Lincoln cent is being described as extremely valuable. A professional grading service can examine the coin and determine whether unusual characteristics are genuine. Certification also gives potential buyers greater confidence when a coin is offered at auction. Without authentication, a dramatic claim about a damaged 1958 cent should always be treated carefully. The market for Lincoln Wheat cents remains strong because these coins attract collectors of many different experience levels. Beginners often enjoy them because they are affordable and historically interesting, while advanced collectors search for scarce dates, high-grade examples, and unusual errors. The final wheat cent years also have special appeal because they represent the end of an era. The 1958 issue was produced only 1 year before the famous wheat reverse disappeared from regular circulation. Imagine finding this coin inside an old collection today. Its surfaces may be dirty. The date may be damaged. Its color may look unattractive. It may appear to have little connection to the bright coins displayed in major auction cases. Yet the coin still carries the history of 1958, a year when Americans were using the final wheat cents without knowing that the design was about to change forever. The 1958 cent also belongs to a fascinating period in American history. The country was experiencing major technological growth, changing transportation, expanding suburbs, and the beginning of the space age. Television was becoming increasingly important in American homes, while automobiles and consumer products were changing everyday life. A small Lincoln cent passed through this rapidly changing society, often unnoticed. When collectors study the coin today, they are looking at more than copper and lettering. They are looking at an object that survived from the final days of the wheat reverse. That historical connection can make even a worn example interesting, although the actual monetary value still depends on rarity, condition, and verified characteristics. Now comes the question every collector wants answered. What could this damaged 1958 Philadelphia cent be worth? An ordinary circulated 1958 cent with dirt, discoloration, and date damage would generally be worth only a small amount above face value. The coin becomes much more interesting only if a genuine and significant mint-made error can be proven. If such an exceptional characteristic were authenticated and attracted strong specialist demand, a high-end, hypothetical collector valuation might reach around $39,500. That figure should not be confused with the normal market price of a circulated 1958 cent. A damaged example without a recognized error would not realistically sell for anything close to that amount. The hypothetical $39,500 figure assumes a rare authenticated production error that significantly separates the coin from the hundreds of millions of ordinary examples. In real auctions, the final result would depend on certification, condition, rarity, provenance, and competition between bidders. That distinction is extremely important because old coin videos often make common coins sound rare, simply because they are old or damaged. Age alone does not create a fortune. A coin becomes genuinely valuable when collectors have a reason to compete for it. Sometimes that reason is a very low mintage. Sometimes it is exceptional condition, and sometimes it is a rare error that occurred during the few seconds when the coin was being manufactured. If you own a 1958 wheat cent, do not clean it just because it looks dirty. Removing the original surface can permanently change the coin and may reduce its collector appeal. Instead, examine the coin under good lighting and magnification. Look carefully at the date, mint mark area, lettering, rim, wheat stalks, and any unusual marks. If something appears to be raised, duplicated, separated, or incorrectly struck, that is when professional evaluation becomes worthwhile. The most important lesson from this coin is that an unattractive appearance does not tell the entire story. A dirty 1958 Lincoln cent may be common, but an authenticated mint-made error can change the conversation completely. The final wheat cent year already gives this coin historical importance, and any genuine production anomaly could make it more appealing to specialists. So before you throw an old 1958 penny into a jar of ordinary change, take another look. Check the date, examine the surfaces, and pay attention to anything that appears unusual. You may not have a fortune, but you could have a coin with a story worth investigating. And sometimes, in the world of collecting, that first careful examination is where the real discovery begins. The Lincoln Wheat Cent series. The example we're looking at today is a 1923 coin without a mint mark, showing the heavy circulation and aged appearance that we often see on pennies that spent many years in everyday use. Its surfaces may look dark, worn, and ordinary, but collectors know that an old Lincoln cent should never be dismissed before its date. Mint mark condition and unusual characteristics have been carefully examined. The Lincoln Wheat Cent was introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. Victor David Brenner created the famous portrait used on the obverse, giving Americans a coin that featured an actual historical person rather than the traditional symbolic image of liberty. The new design quickly became one of the most recognizable coins in the country. By 1923, millions of Lincoln cents had already passed through American hands, but collectors were beginning to recognize that differences in mint production, condition, and survival could make certain dates considerably more interesting than others. The obverse of the 1923 Lincoln cent shows Abraham Lincoln facing right. Above his portrait is the inscription, "In God We Trust," while liberty appears on the left and the date is positioned on the right. On this particular example, there is no mint mark beneath the date. That detail indicates Philadelphia production, because the Philadelphia Mint traditionally did not place a mint mark on its Lincoln cents. This is important for collectors because the absence of a mint mark on a 1923 cent is normal and should not by itself be described as an error or rare missing mint mark variety. The reverse displays the familiar wheat design that made these pennies famous. Two wheat ears curve along the outer edges while 1 cent and United States of America occupy the center. Above them is the historic motto, E pluribus unum. This reverse remained in use until 1958, giving the Lincoln Wheat Cent a nearly 50-year production history. The design is simple but highly recognizable, and collectors often enjoy examining how the wheat stalks, lettering, and other details survive differently on coins depending on their grade and circulation history. The 1923 Philadelphia Lincoln cent had a mintage of approximately 74.7 million pieces. That is a substantial production figure, and it means the ordinary 1923 cent is not considered a great rarity simply because of its age. However, surviving population, condition, original color, unusual errors, and documented varieties can make individual examples much more desirable. PCGS lists the 1923 Philadelphia issue at relatively modest values in ordinary grades, while higher quality examples can command stronger prices. The condition described on our example is especially important. A circulated old Lincoln cent may have scratches, dark toning, dirt, flattened details, and areas of discoloration. These characteristics usually indicate that the coin spent a significant amount of time in circulation or was stored in less than ideal conditions. Heavy wear can remove the fine details from Lincoln's hair and facial features, while the reverse wheat ears may become smooth and difficult to distinguish. Although this type of condition generally lowers value, it does not erase the historical importance of the coin. Collectors also pay close attention to the date because damaged numbers can sometimes create confusion. On an old coin, corrosion, scratches, dirt, and wear may make a digit look thinner, larger, or partially erased. A collector should never assume that a strange-looking 1923 date represents a rare variety simply because it appears different from a photograph online. Genuine varieties and errors require comparison with recognized references and, when necessary, professional examination. This is where the market becomes particularly interesting. A normal circulated 1923 Philadelphia cent is generally an affordable collectible. It would be misleading to claim that an ordinary worn example is worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. However, the story changes if a coin is proven to contain an extraordinary previously unrecognized mint error or another genuinely rare characteristic. The coin market can sometimes reward uniqueness at levels far above normal catalog values, but such a valuation requires strong evidence, professional authentication, and serious collector demand. For the exceptional scenario discussed in this video, imagine that this particular 1923 cent is discovered to contain a dramatic and unquestionably mint-made error that has not previously been recognized in the marketplace. If experts confirm the feature, the coin is certified, and major collectors compete for it at auction. A theoretical headline valuation around $400,000 could be discussed. This would not represent the normal auction value of a circulated 1923 Philadelphia wheat cent. Instead, it would be an extraordinary one-of-a-kind scenario based on a major authenticated rarity. That distinction is extremely important for anyone watching this video. The year 1923 alone does not create a $400,000 coin. The missing mint mark is normal. Circulated condition usually reduces value. Dirt and dark toning are not automatically valuable. The extraordinary value would have to come from something genuinely rare and independently confirmed. This is how experienced collectors approach the market. They do not simply look at the date and choose a huge number. They investigate exactly what makes the individual coin different. The historical background of the 1923 cent also gives it lasting appeal. America in the early 1920s was experiencing major social and economic changes. Automobiles were becoming increasingly common, radio was transforming communication, and American industry was expanding rapidly. Through all of these changes, the Lincoln cent remained part of everyday life. A tiny coin could be used to buy a small item, dropped into a cash drawer, carried in a pocket, or saved in a household container. That everyday history is part of what makes wheat cents so enjoyable to collect. Unlike many rare coins that were created specifically for collectors, Lincoln wheat cents were ordinary circulating money. They were handled by millions of people. Some survived in excellent condition because they were removed from circulation early, while others became heavily worn after decades of use. Finding an old coin today is therefore like finding a small survivor from the daily life of another generation. Collectors examining a 1923 cent should also pay attention to the surfaces. Original brown coloration, natural toning, and stable surfaces can be preferable to coins that have been cleaned or artificially altered. A dark coin should not automatically be polished. Cleaning can leave hairlines and unnatural surfaces that professional graders recognize immediately. Even if the coin looks unattractive, its original surface may contain important information about its history and authenticity. The reverse deserves just as much attention as the obverse. Look carefully around the wheat ears, lettering, denomination, and rim. A genuine mint-made error could appear in several forms, including a planchet problem, off-center strike, clipped planchet, die crack, retained cud, or another recognized production anomaly. But each type has its own characteristics. A simple scratch created after the coin entered circulation is damage, not a valuable mint error. Weight can also provide useful information. A standard Lincoln wheat cent from this period was made from a bronze alloy and normally weighs about 3.11 grams when newly struck. Significant differences may justify additional examination. However, wear, corrosion, dirt, and damage can influence measurements, so weight alone should never be used as proof of a rare error. Serious collectors combine several pieces of evidence before reaching a conclusion. The auction market rewards coins that combine rarity, authenticity, condition, and demand. A coin can be technically unusual, but still attract limited interest if collectors do not consider the feature important. Conversely, a famous rarity can receive tremendous attention because many collectors want the same piece. That is why the reputation of the Lincoln Wheat Cent series is so valuable. Generations of collectors have built sets around these dates, creating an established market for exceptional examples. If you own a 1923 Lincoln Wheat Cent, the best approach is simple. Do not clean it, do not scratch the surface to expose the date, and do not use chemicals to change its color. Photograph both sides in good lighting, inspect the coin with magnification, and compare its characteristics with trusted references. If you believe the coin contains an unusual mint-made feature, professional authentication is the safest way to determine whether the characteristic is genuine. The 1923 Philadelphia Lincoln Wheat Cent may not be a rare coin simply because it has no mint mark, but it remains an important piece of American history. Its age, classic Brenner design, wheat reverse, and connection to everyday life in the 1920s make it an enjoyable collectible. And if an extraordinary mint-made error were ever authenticated on a circulated example, that discovery could completely change its place in the market. That possibility is exactly why experienced collectors continue to look closely at even the most worn old pennies. Next up is the 1944 Abraham Lincoln Wheat Cent. Without a mint mark, a coin that comes from the final years of World War II and represents another fascinating chapter in the history of American coinage. The example we're looking at today is described as having a large-looking date, no visible mint mark, and an old circulated condition. After more than 80 years, a coin like this can show significant wear, darkening, scratches, and changes in color. Yet its historical background makes it an interesting piece to examine carefully. The 1944 Lincoln Cent was produced after the United States Mint ended its one-year experiment with zinc-coated steel cents. In 1943, steel was used to conserve copper for wartime needs. By 1944, the mint returned to a copper-based composition, although the metal used in the 1944 cent was not exactly the same as the traditional pre-war bronze. The standard 1944 cent was made from a copper alloy containing about 95% copper, with tin and zinc making up the balance. The obverse continues the familiar Victor David Brenner portrait of Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln faces right, with "In God We Trust" above him, "Liberty" to the left, and the date 1944 beneath the portrait. Because this example has no mint mark, it would represent the Philadelphia Mint issue if the coin is genuine. Philadelphia cents normally carry no mint mark, so the absence of a letter beneath the date is completely normal and is not itself an error. The reverse displays the famous wheat design with two wheat stalks surrounding 1 cent and United States of America. Above them is E Pluribus Unum. By 1944, this design had been in circulation for more than 3 decades and had become deeply familiar to Americans. Today, the wheat reverse is one of the main reasons collectors continue to search for these older Lincoln cents. The Philadelphia Mint produced approximately 1.435 billion regular 1944 Lincoln cents. That enormous production means a normal 1944 Philadelphia cent is generally common. A circulated example with ordinary wear would not normally command a large price simply because it is old. The value story becomes different only when a coin has a recognized rare variety, major mint error, exceptional preservation, or an unusual composition. The description of a large date should again be treated with caution. A date can appear larger or more prominent because of the way the coin was struck, how much wear it has, or how the surface reflects light. Collectors should compare suspected varieties with documented references rather than relying only on visual impressions. A genuine recognized variety can be valuable, but a normal date that merely looks large is not automatically rare. The old circulated condition of the coin is another important factor. More than 80 years of handling can leave the surface with scratches, dark toning, stains, and flattened details. Lincoln's hair and facial features may show considerable wear, while the wheat stalks on the reverse can become weak. Such a coin can still be a useful historical collectible, but condition would normally limit its value unless another major rarity is present. The most important 1944 Lincoln cent varieties are not based simply on the absence of a mint mark. Instead, collectors pay close attention to unusual compositions and documented mint varieties. One of the most famous is the 1944 steel cent. These rare pieces were struck on leftover steel planchets from the previous year's production and are dramatically different from normal 1944 copper cents. Genuine examples can bring extraordinary prices. In fact, the rare 1944 steel cent has reached a recorded auction price of $408,000, while a 1944 Philadelphia steel cent has reached $180,000 in a major auction. Those prices demonstrate how a rare composition error can completely transform the value of a Lincoln cent. But a normal 1944 Philadelphia copper cent should never be valued at those levels simply because it is dated 1944. That distinction is especially important for anyone finding an old wheat cent. A coin may have dark color, unusual marks, or a strange appearance because of age and environmental exposure. Those features do not automatically indicate a valuable error. The strongest discoveries are supported by measurable evidence such as weight, composition, documented die characteristics, and professional authentication. For the particular coin described here, if the old circulated specimen were found to contain a genuinely rare mint-made feature associated with the 1944 issue, its collector interest could increase dramatically. However, if it is simply a normal Philadelphia 1944 copper cent with a large-looking date and ordinary circulation damage, the market value would be much lower than the extraordinary figures sometimes seen in headlines. For this video, an exceptional hypothetical collector valuation of around $435,000 could be discussed only if the coin were professionally authenticated as an extremely rare 1944 mint error or unusual composition, with the evidence strong enough to justify major auction attention. This figure is deliberately higher than the first coin and reflects a hypothetical top-tier scenario. It is not a claim that every 1944 Philadelphia wheat cent without a mint mark is worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. The historical background makes this coin particularly fascinating. In 1944, the United States was still fighting World War II, and American factories were producing enormous quantities of military equipment. The return to copper cents reflected changing wartime material needs. Every small coin circulating during that period was part of the everyday economy of a nation undergoing extraordinary change. The coin's physical details also tell part of its story. A normal 1944 Philadelphia cent weighs about 3.11 grams and has a diameter of approximately 19 millimeters. It has a plain edge and the familiar copper alloy. If an example has a substantially different weight or shows evidence of steel, collectors should stop and investigate rather than assuming it is ordinary damage. This is why collectors often recommend using a scale and magnet as basic screening tools, while remembering that these tests do not replace professional authentication. A steel planchet can react differently to a magnet, while weight can help separate normal copper cents from unusual compositions. But surface appearance alone is not enough to prove a rare error. The market for Lincoln Wheat cents continues to attract collectors because the series contains a remarkable mixture of common coins, scarce dates, famous errors, and legendary varieties. The 1944 issue is a perfect example. Billions of normal cents were made, yet a tiny number of unusual pieces became some of the most valuable Lincoln cents ever sold. If you own a 1944 Lincoln Wheat cent without a mint mark, do not assume that the absence of a mint mark is an error. Philadelphia normally used no mint mark. Instead, carefully inspect the coin for unusual composition, documented varieties, or other genuine mint-made characteristics. Most importantly, never clean it. Original surfaces and evidence of the coin's manufacturing history are far more useful than a shiny appearance created by polishing. A large-looking date can certainly make a coin worth examining, but it should be the beginning of the investigation, not the conclusion. Compare the digits with authenticated examples, examine the surfaces under magnification, and look for characteristics that can be independently verified. If something truly unusual is present, professional grading and authentication can provide the confidence needed before considering a major auction. The 1944 Philadelphia Lincoln Wheat cent may look like a simple old penny, but its connection to World War II, the return of the copper composition, and the existence of rare 1944 steel errors make this an especially interesting year for collectors. Sometimes the most valuable lesson is that rarity is not always visible at first glance. So if a 1944 Lincoln Wheat cent turns up in an old collection, inherited box, or forgotten coin jar, give it a careful second look. Check the date, inspect the area beneath it, study the metal, and compare the coin with known examples. Most will be ordinary, but the rare exception is exactly what keeps collectors searching. In the world of Lincoln Wheat cents, one tiny difference can turn a familiar penny into a remarkable piece of American numismatic history. One of the most important things to remember about this date is that the word rare can mean different things. A coin can be historically interesting without being scarce, while a specific error can be rare even when the regular issue is extremely common. The 1944 Philadelphia cent demonstrates that difference perfectly. Its huge mintage makes ordinary examples readily available, but unusual pieces created during production can be dramatically harder to find. The surfaces should also be examined carefully. On an old circulated copper cent, brown color, dark patches, small scratches, and uneven toning are common. These features usually reflect the coin's life after it left the mint. They should not be confused with a doubled die, an off-center strike, a wrong planchet, or another genuine mint error. Raised lines, repeated design elements, unusual rims, and composition differences are more useful clues. Collectors can also compare the coin with authenticated examples from the same year and mint. Modern photographs and auction archives make this easier than it was decades ago, but visual comparison still requires caution. Lighting can exaggerate differences, and camera angles can make normal dates appear unusual. The strongest evidence comes from measurable characteristics and recognized variety references. If the coin were ever submitted to an auction house, specialists would want a clear description of exactly what makes it unusual. A vague statement such as large date would not be enough to justify an enormous estimate. A documented error, authenticated composition, or recognized variety would provide a much stronger foundation for serious bidding. That is why the 1944 cent remains such a fascinating coin to investigate. It looks familiar, yet the year sits directly in the middle of a remarkable transition in American coin production. The normal copper issue is common, while the rare steel survivors demonstrate just how dramatic a small manufacturing mistake can become. For a collector, that contrast is part of the excitement. You can hold two coins with the same date in your hand and discover that one is ordinary while the other contains a feature that specialists have spent years studying. This is why old Lincoln cents remain popular even in the age of digital collecting. When evaluating a possible rarity, patience is more valuable than excitement. Take photographs in good light, avoid touching the surfaces unnecessarily, record the weight, and compare the coin with trusted references. If the evidence continues to look unusual, professional authentication is the logical next step. A genuine discovery should be documented, not guessed. That approach gives the coin a stronger history and gives future buyers confidence in what they are actually purchasing. It also helps protect collectors from confusing damage with rarity and value. Next up is the 1934 Abraham Lincoln Wheat 1 cent, a coin from the period when America was slowly recovering from the Great Depression. The example we're looking at today has a clearly recognizable 1934 date, no visible mint mark, and a circulated fine condition that shows the effects of decades of use. It is not the kind of coin that would immediately impress someone looking only for bright, uncirculated pieces. Its surfaces have experienced years of handling, and some of the original details have been softened by circulation. Yet early Lincoln Wheat cents are exactly the kind of coins that experienced collectors examine carefully before deciding what they are worth. The Lincoln Wheat cent was introduced in 1909 to commemorate the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. Victor David Brenner created the famous portrait that appeared on the obverse, giving the United States a circulating coin featuring the image of a real historical American president. Lincoln faces right, with "In God We Trust." Above him, "Liberty" to the left, and the date positioned below the portrait. The design was simple enough for everyday use, but distinctive enough to become one of the most recognizable American coins ever made. On this 1934 example, the absence of a mint mark is an important detail. Philadelphia mint cents normally carried no mint mark, while coins struck at Denver or San Francisco carried a D or S. Therefore, a 1934 Lincoln cent without a mint mark represents the Philadelphia issue unless other evidence proves otherwise. This is important because the missing mint mark should not automatically be described as an error. In fact, collectors expect a Philadelphia 1934 cent to have no mint mark. The reverse displays the famous wheat design that had been used since the beginning of the Lincoln cent series. Two wheat ears surround the words 1 cent and United States of America, while E pluribus unum appears above. The reverse is one of the reasons wheat cents remain so popular today. Even after years of circulation, the wheat stalks and lettering can preserve the appearance of an earlier America, when 1 cent coins were an important part of everyday commerce. The year 1934 is also historically interesting. The United States was still dealing with the effects of the Great Depression. Millions of Americans were experiencing economic hardship, unemployment remained high, and the country was undergoing major changes under President Franklin D. Roosevelt. A small 1 cent coin might have been used repeatedly for purchases, exchanged between businesses, carried in pockets, and eventually placed into jars or drawers. Every mark on a circulated 1934 cent can therefore represent decades of ordinary American life. The Philadelphia Mint produced approximately 219.1 million Lincoln cents in 1934. That is a substantial production figure, meaning the date itself is not an extreme rarity. However, surviving examples can differ dramatically in condition. Many circulated pieces became worn, scratched, corroded, or otherwise damaged. Collectors particularly value examples with strong original surfaces and attractive preservation. A coin that survived decades with minimal wear can command much more attention than a heavily damaged example from the same year. The phrase large date sometimes appears in descriptions of older Lincoln cents, but collectors should be careful about treating every visually large-looking date as a recognized variety. On a circulated coin, wear, strike characteristics, photography, and surface damage can make the date appear different from another example. A genuine major variety should be compared against documented references and, when necessary, professionally attributed. The 1934 Philadelphia cent is better known for its normal date and minting characteristics than for a universally recognized major large date variety. This does not mean an unusual-looking 1934 cent should be ignored. Collectors search for die varieties, doubled details, die cracks, repunched features, lamination problems, off-center strikes, broad strikes, clip-end planchets, and other mint-made errors. The key is determining whether the unusual feature was created at the United States Mint or happened after the coin entered circulation. A scratch caused by a machine is damage. A defect formed in the planchet before striking can be a mint error. Those two things can look surprisingly similar to an inexperienced eye. The circulated fine condition of this example would normally place it well below the finest surviving 1934 cents in the market. Fine condition coins show considerable wear, especially on Lincoln's hair and facial features and on the wheat stalks of the reverse. Nevertheless, condition is only one part of a coin's story. If a circulated coin contains a significant and authenticated mint error, the error can become far more important than the grade alone. That is why professional authentication matters so much. A collector examining this coin would want to inspect the date, lettering, rim, surfaces, and any unusual feature under magnification. The coin should be compared with known examples to determine whether the alleged large date is actually a recognized variety. If an error is claimed, specialists would also study the shape, location, and metal flow around the affected area. This careful process can prevent an ordinary damaged cent from being mistaken for a rare mint error. The collector market for Lincoln Wheat cents remains strong because the series offers something for everyone. Beginners can search inexpensive circulated examples, while advanced collectors can spend years studying varieties and condition rarities. The 1934 issue sits in an interesting part of the series because it is old enough to have strong historical appeal, while still being available to collectors at different price levels. For an ordinary circulated 1934 Philadelphia Lincoln cent, a value anywhere near hundreds of thousands of dollars would not be realistic. The market simply does not support that price for a normal example. However, if the particular coin we're discussing were proven to contain an exceptionally rare, dramatic, and professionally authenticated mint error, the situation could change. For the purposes of this video, an exceptional high-end collector valuation of approximately $400,000 can be presented for an extraordinary authenticated specimen with a major error and exceptional market demand. That is a hypothetical premium scenario, not the normal value of a circulated 1934 cent. This distinction is extremely important for collectors. A headline value should never be applied to every coin with the same date. Auction prices are determined by the exact specimen. A rare error, unusual strike, exceptional preservation, recognized variety, and strong certification can create a completely different market from an ordinary circulated coin. Two coins with the same date can therefore sell for dramatically different amounts. The darkened or worn appearance of an old cent should also never encourage cleaning. Many people see dirt and believe that polishing the coin will make it more valuable. In reality, cleaning can leave scratches, unnatural brightness, and permanent surface damage. Collectors generally prefer coins with original surfaces, even when those surfaces are not perfectly attractive. If you believe your 1934 cent contains something unusual, preserve it exactly as you found it and seek expert advice. The most exciting part of collecting is often the uncertainty. A coin can spend decades unnoticed in a box or family collection before someone finally realizes that a particular feature deserves attention. The 1934 Lincoln cent may have been worth only 1 cent when it entered circulation, but its history is much richer today. It survived an important period in American history and became part of a coin series collected by millions of people. If you have a 1934 Lincoln Wheat cent without a mint mark, start by identifying it correctly as a Philadelphia issue. Then inspect the date, portrait, lettering, rim, and reverse under good lighting. Look for anything that appears different from normal examples, but do not immediately assume that every unusual mark is an error. Genuine numismatic value comes from documented characteristics, not simply from a dramatic description. The 1934 Lincoln Wheat cent may not be one of the lowest mintage dates in the series, but it remains an interesting historic coin. Its connection to Depression-era America, the famous Lincoln design, and more than 9 decades of collector interest make it worth examining. And if an authenticated mint-made error is discovered on an otherwise ordinary-looking example, that small piece of metal could suddenly become much more interesting to the collector market. Is the 1950s Abraham Lincoln Wheat 1 cent, a coin from the post-war years that can still attract attention when collectors discover an unusual mint mark, striking characteristic, or well-preserved example. The coin we're looking at today is described as having a large-looking date, an S mint mark, and a circulated lined fine condition with noticeable color change from age and handling. At first glance, it may appear to be nothing more than an old wheat cent that spent decades moving through everyday commerce. But experienced collectors know that a closer examination can sometimes reveal details that make an ordinary coin much more interesting. The Lincoln Wheat cent had already become an American classic by 1950. The design was introduced in 1909 to honor the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. Victor David Brenner created Lincoln's portrait for the obverse, making it the first regular United States circulating coin to feature the portrait of a real historical person. By 1950, Americans had been using the design for more than 40 years, and the coin had become a familiar part of daily life. The obverse shows Abraham Lincoln facing right. The words, "In God We Trust," appear above his portrait, while liberty is placed to the left and the date 1950 appears below and toward the right. The S mint mark beneath the date identifies the San Francisco Mint. That small letter is one of the first details collectors should check because it separates this coin from the Philadelphia and Denver issues of the same year. The reverse presents the famous wheat design. 2 wheat stalks frame 1 cent and United States of America, while E pluribus unum appears above. This reverse had been used for generations, and by 1950 it represented a long period of American history. The design would remain in production until 1958, when the wheat reverse was replaced by the Lincoln Memorial reverse. The San Francisco Mint struck 118,505,000 Lincoln cents in 1950. That is a substantial mintage, so the normal 1950 S wheat cent is not a rare coin simply because it carries an S mint mark. However, collectors often look beyond mintage numbers. They search for recognized dye varieties, repunched mint marks, unusually strong strikes, attractive color, and examples that survived in better condition than most coins from the same issue. The description of a large date should be approached carefully. A date can look unusually large because of lighting, wear, dye characteristics, photography, or comparison with another coin. The 1950s Lincoln cent is known for recognized mint mark varieties, including repunched mint mark examples, but a collector should not automatically call every large-looking date a separate rare variety. Professional attribution is the safest way to determine whether a suspected variety is recognized by the numismatic community. The S-mint mark itself deserves close attention. Collectors can examine the area around the mint mark for signs of a repunched mint mark or other dye characteristics. A genuine repunched mint mark is a production feature created when a mint mark was punched into a working die more than once in slightly different positions. These varieties can be collectible because they preserve evidence of how coins were made before modern computerized minting technology. The circulated fine condition of the example also affects its value. A coin that has spent many years in circulation will normally show wear on Lincoln's hair, cheek, jaw, coat, and surrounding lettering. On the reverse, the wheat stalks and lettering can become softer. Lines, scratches, stains, and changes in color may also appear. Collectors generally prefer coins with attractive original surfaces, but an identifiable variety can remain interesting even when the coin has significant circulation. Color is another factor worth examining. A copper Lincoln cent can change from its original reddish appearance to reddish-brown or brown as the surface reacts with age and the environment. Dark toning is not automatically evidence of a mint error, and unusual color should not be treated as proof of rarity. In some cases, however, original color and attractive toning can increase collector appeal, especially when the coin also has strong details. The market for Lincoln Wheat cents remains active because these coins are accessible to beginners while offering advanced collectors hundreds of dates, mint marks, and varieties to pursue. Many people still search old jars, inherited collections, albums, and rolls of coins. The possibility of finding a scarce variety keeps the series exciting, even though billions of Lincoln Wheat cents were produced over its long history. For the particular 1950s coin described here, the key question is whether the unusual features are genuine mint characteristics. If the S mint mark shows a recognized repunched variety and the coin has an additional documented striking anomaly, collector interest could be stronger than for a normal circulated example. But ordinary scratches, circulation lines, discoloration, and environmental damage would generally not create a major premium. That distinction is important when discussing a huge market value. A normal circulated 1950s Lincoln cent is nowhere near hundreds of thousands of dollars. Current specialist records show much more modest prices for ordinary 1950s examples, while recognized varieties and exceptional grades can bring higher premiums. Therefore, a claim of a $400,000 value would require an extraordinary and independently authenticated circumstance, not simply a large-looking date or an S mint mark. For this video, if the featured coin were authenticated as an exceptionally rare combination of a recognized mint mark variety and another major mint-made error, a hypothetical high-end collector valuation could be discussed around $400,000. This is an exceptional scenario, not the normal market value of a circulated 1950s wheat cent. The actual auction price would depend on certification, rarity, condition, documented variety attribution, provenance, and competition among bidders. That is what makes this coin worth examining carefully. The date 1950 is not enough. The S mint mark is not enough. Circulated condition is not enough. The real value would have to come from something genuinely rare and created during the manufacturing process. If a specialist can prove that the coin contains such a feature, its story changes from an old penny to a documented piece of minting history. Collectors should also avoid cleaning the coin. Scrubbing, polishing, chemicals, or abrasive materials can permanently change the surface and remove evidence that may help identify a variety or error. Even a dark or dirty wheat cent can contain useful information. The best approach is to photograph both sides, Inspect the mint mark and date under magnification, record the weight, and seek professional advice if something looks unusual. The 1950s Lincoln Wheat scent may not be one of the famous key dates simply because of its mintage, but its place in the history of the wheat scent series makes it worth a second look. It represents post-war America, the final decade of the classic wheat reverse, and a period when traditional hand-punched mint marks and dye preparation could create collectible varieties. If you ever find a 1950s wheat scent with a strange-looking mint mark or unusual date, do not immediately assume it is either worthless or extremely valuable. Compare it with authenticated examples, look for recognized characteristics, and let evidence guide the conclusion. Sometimes the smallest detail on a coin can be the difference between an ordinary collectible and a remarkable discovery. Another detail worth remembering is that the 1950s cent belongs to a period when the wheat reverse was approaching the end of its long run. The United States was moving into a new decade, but the familiar Lincoln design remained unchanged. That continuity is one reason collectors enjoy assembling complete sets. A 1950s may not have the fame of a legendary key date, but it helps tell the story of how the Lincoln cent remained a daily part of American life after the war. Collectors also compare the quality of the strike. A circulated coin can still show stronger details in some areas than another example from the same year. The wheat lines, Lincoln's hair, lettering, and rim can provide clues about how forcefully the dies struck the planche. A weak area is not automatically an error, but unusual weakness combined with other documented characteristics can make a coin worth further study. The phrase circulated fine condition is important because it sets expectations. A fine-grade coin has already experienced considerable contact with other coins and objects. Its surfaces may have small marks, and its original mint luster will normally be gone. For a common date, this condition is not especially valuable. For a scarce variety, however, collectors can still appreciate the coin because the important variety may remain visible. The best discoveries are often made when collectors slow down. Instead of looking only at the date, they examine the entire coin. They check the spacing of letters, the shape of the mint mark, the rim, the wheat stalks, and any unusual lines or raised areas. A raised feature that follows the design can have a very different origin from a groove cut into the surface. Learning those differences is one of the most useful skills a coin hunter can develop. The 1950s also has recognized repunched mint mark varieties, which makes the area beneath the date particularly interesting. If the mint mark appears to show a secondary impression, it should be compared with known examples before a value is assigned. A photograph can help with a first comparison, but a professional attribution is much stronger evidence. The phrase large date should therefore be treated as a description until it is supported by recognized evidence. A visual difference may be interesting, but collectors need documented diagnostics before treating it as a scarce variety. This is especially important when a coin is being presented with a very high valuation. If the coin has been stored in a humid environment, the color changes may be environmental rather than original toning. Collectors should avoid using household chemicals to remove them. A professional can evaluate whether the surfaces are stable and whether the color has been altered. This is particularly useful when the coin is being considered for certification, because cleaning or artificial treatment can affect how a grading service describes the piece. The story of the 1950s is therefore not simply about a number printed on a coin. It is about the combination of date, mint, manufacturing process, preservation, and evidence. That combination is what turns a small copper cent into a collectible object with a story worth telling. For viewers searching their own collections, keep unusual wheat cents protected until they can be identified. A holder and note about where the coin was found can preserve useful information for future evaluation. Now let's move to the second coin, because the next Lincoln cent comes from 1941 and carries an S mint mark that immediately tells us the coin was produced at the San Francisco Mint. The 1941 to S Lincoln Wheat cent is an important part of the early 1940s series, and the example we're discussing is described as having a rare error characteristic and circulated condition. While an ordinary 1941 S cent is not worth a fortune, an authenticated and significant mint error can make a major difference in collector interest. The year 1941 was an important moment in American history. The United States was approaching its entry into World War II, and the country was experiencing enormous industrial and political changes. Factories were increasing production, military preparations were expanding, and everyday Americans were living through a period that would soon transform the nation. A 1941 Lincoln cent therefore represents America just before the wartime coinage changes that became famous in 1943. The obverse again features Abraham Lincoln facing right. "In God We Trust" appears above his portrait, "Liberty" is placed to the left, and the date 1941 appears below. Beneath the date is the S mint mark, identifying the San Francisco Mint. This small letter can be extremely important when identifying Lincoln cents because the three major mints used different mint marks during this period. The reverse continues the classic wheat cent design. The two wheat ears frame 1 cent and United States of America, while E pluribus unum appears above. By 1941, this design had already been in circulation for more than 30 years. Millions of Americans had become familiar with Lincoln's portrait and the wheat reverse, making the coin an important part of everyday American commerce. The San Francisco Mint produced approximately 92.35 million Lincoln cents in 1941. Compared with some of the largest Philadelphia mintages, this was considerably lower, but it does not make every 1941 to S cent a rare coin. Many examples survived because Lincoln wheat cents were saved by collectors and families. The real interest begins when an individual specimen contains a recognized variety or genuine mint error. The example we're discussing is described as having a rare error associated with the S mint mark. This is where careful examination becomes essential. Mint marks can sometimes appear unusual because of die characteristics, damage, wear, or photographs. A genuine mint-made error involving a mint mark must be distinguished from damage that occurred later. Collectors, therefore, compare the S mint mark with known examples and study its shape, placement, and surrounding metal. Another possibility collectors investigate with older Lincoln cents is doubling. Genuine doubled dies occur when the die itself carries a doubled design that is transferred to multiple coins. This is different from mechanical doubling, which can appear as a flat shelf-like secondary impression caused during striking. The difference can greatly affect collector interest. An unusual-looking letter or mint mark should therefore never be called a valuable doubled die without careful examination. The circulated condition of this 1941 S cent also affects its potential market value. Years of use can remove Lincoln's hair detail, soften the lettering, and wear the wheat stalks on the reverse. Scratches, dark toning, and environmental damage may further reduce its appeal. Yet, if the unusual S mint mark represents a genuine and rare mint-made error, collectors may focus more strongly on the error itself than on the coin's otherwise ordinary grade. The best way to establish such a claim is professional authentication. A grading service or qualified specialist can examine the coin under magnification and compare the alleged error against documented references. This is especially important when a high value is being considered. Rare Lincoln cent errors are collectible because they provide evidence of something unusual happening during production, and collectors want confidence that the feature is genuine. The market for Lincoln wheat cents has remained active for generations. Collectors search old penny jars, inherited collections, coin rolls, and estate purchases hoping to discover unusual pieces. The 1941 S is particularly interesting because it sits immediately before the famous wartime steel cent era. It represents the traditional bronze Lincoln cent at a time when the country was about to enter one of the most important periods in American history. For an ordinary circulated 1941 S Lincoln cent, a value of hundreds of thousands of dollars would not be realistic. However, the scenario changes if the coin contains a dramatic, rare, and professionally authenticated mint error that is recognized by specialists and attracts serious competition. For this video, an exceptional hypothetical high-end collector valuation could be placed around $425,000, making it different from the estimated value of the first coin. Again, this figure represents an extraordinary error coin scenario, rather than the normal market value of a circulated 1941 S cent. The difference between the two values is intentional because every coin must be judged individually. The 1934 Philadelphia cent and the 1941 S cent have different mintages, different historical backgrounds, different mint characteristics, and potentially different error features.
A collector would never value them solely because both are Lincoln Wheat cents. If you have a 1941 S Lincoln cent, begin by checking the date and the S mint mark. Then examine the mint mark closely and compare it with authenticated examples. Look for unusual doubling, cracks, die characteristics, or other features, but remember that post-mint damage is not the same as a mint error. Do not polish the coin, scratch around the mint mark, or attempt to remove its natural toning. The greatest attraction of the 1941 S Lincoln cent is its connection to a remarkable moment in American history. Within only a few years, the nation would change the composition of the Lincoln cent because of wartime material demands. The 1941 S cent therefore represents the final years of the traditional bronze era before one of the most famous experiments in United States coinage. And that is why these old pennies continue to fascinate collectors. A 1934 Philadelphia Lincoln cent can connect us to Depression-era America, while a 1941 S Lincoln cent takes us to the doorstep of World War II. Both coins can be common in ordinary forms, but unusual mint-made characteristics can make individual specimens much more interesting. The real treasure is not simply the date printed on the coin. It is the story, rarity, condition, and authenticated feature hidden within that tiny piece of American history. Next up is the 1974 Abraham Lincoln 1 cent, a coin from a completely different period of American history, and one that is especially interesting because it belongs to the later years of the Lincoln Memorial cent era. The example we're looking at today is described as a rare, large-date coin without a mint mark in circulated fine condition. Its surfaces show the effects of everyday use, but the date remains an important feature for collectors examining possible varieties and unusual characteristics. By 1974, the Lincoln cent had already undergone a major design change. The original wheat reverse had disappeared in 1958, and in 1959, the United States Mint introduced the Lincoln Memorial reverse. Designed by Frank Gasparo, the new reverse placed the Lincoln Memorial at the center, creating a strong connection